Cataclysm, The Legends of Thalaria by Lorecaster Pendragon. Chapter 1, Cataclysm. Grand Wizard Lorecaster Pendragon and his apprentice Hiram Allheart stepped carefully through the snow to the summit of Mount News. Icy wind blew around them seemingly from all directions, an unnatural force directed by callous hands. The mountain overlooked the land of Thalaria. Many cities and villages could be seen from here, including the Tower of the Magi, a tower built by the Wizards Guild to train mages. A town above the landscape, a testament to the power of the guild, where Lore had trained in his younger years.
Master Pendragon, we shouldn't be in this place!
Hiram shouted above the roar of the wind, almost losing his footing on the ice. Lorecaster Pendragon turned to him. "We have to find him, Hiram. Guldamy didn't revive those mages and bring them up here for no reason. He's up to something sinister." Lore's voice cut through the wind, enhanced by powerful magic. Lore stood strong. His long beard swayed in the wind. He had his feet planted as if magnetized by the stone. His apprentice Hiram followed suit and found his balance with a reassuring sigh. Continuing along the rocky slope, they saw the fallen soldiers of the dark wizard Guldamir Godfear. Lore looked them over, then turned to Hiram. "Looks like they met some trouble here. We need to reach the summit swiftly." As he turned back, a dense black fog descended the mountain as if compelled by a will of its own. Moving faster, it swirled around the fallen men, turning shades of bright green as the men rose to their feet, lifted by the black miasma. It penetrated into their bodies. Their eyes turned black, their pupils green. They all turned to look in the direction of Lore and Hiram.
Necromancy?
Hiram shouted, horrified.
How was he able to raise the dead from such a distance?
The reincarnated soldiers drew their swords, and with rasping growls they advanced towards Lore and Hiram. Lore placed his fists together, with his knuckles interlocked. Looking to Hiram, he said, "I'll need but a moment." Hiram nodded and drew a long ornate steel staff that was strapped to his back.
5-on-1? Not great odds.
Hiram rushed forward, hoping to catch one of them risen off guard. He raised his staff high above his head and jumped forward, bringing the staff rocketing down at speed onto the crown of the first soldier's head. With a resounding crack, the soldier hit the snow. Hiram wasted no time moving onto the second target. He slid down on one knee, sliding across some ice-covered snow. He swept the legs out from under it with a horizontal sweep of his staff. The third wasn't far behind and struck forward with a broadsword towards Hiram's face. Hiram brought one end of the staff up to defend. As the two clashed, the ring of steel sang out. Hiram turned his wrist and flipped the end of the staff down onto the soldier's wrists. Another loud crack could be heard as the sword clanged along the ice. Hiram followed up by stabbing his staff into the ground and stepping his foot around it. He coiled the staff around his hip and let the tension go. The staff shot around his hip into the side of the soldier's head like a tension spring, taking the soldier clear off his feet. Hiram spun on the ice with the momentum of the strike. A fourth soldier ran forward with a short mace in hand as Hiram withdrew his staff back through his hands. He launched forward using the superior range of the staff with a straight stab, the tip to the midsection, knocking his opponent backward. He then raised the staff with his backhand to bring it around his head in a Mauki motion and down onto the top of the soldier's head. The soldier whiplashed forward and fell on his back. A fifth soldier moved at Hiram with dual broadswords, slashing from what seemed to be every direction in continuous slashing motions. Hiram raised his back hand to his brow, his forward hand at the center of the staff. In a defensive motion, moving the staff side to side, he blocked each strike in quick succession. The second soldier found his feet and was advancing to Hiram's rear. Hiram took a step back, and as the soldier came close, he swung his staff around using his Tenkan technique. a 180-degree rotation on the back foot. Aram's staff moved with the spinning motion. He collected the soldier in front across the jaw and took the legs out from the other soldier for the second time. With all 5 undead soldiers now floored, he lowered his guard. "Aram, look out!" shouted Law from a distance. Aaron turned to see all 5 soldiers rising again, black miasma pulling them to their feet. One of the soldiers had a broken arm, and another had a crushed skull, yet somehow they were still able to fight.
This is no ordinary magic. Something's off. It's much more potent than it should be.
Aram said, fear creeping onto his face. Lawcaster Pendragon raised one arm forward toward an ice sheet overhanging the cliff. Grabbing his elbow with his other arm, he grasped it hard, funneling his power into it. "Aram, get out of the way!" Law shouted. Aaron sprinted towards Law and slid beneath his feet as Lawcaster Pendragon let fly a fireball the size of a cannonball into the side of the mountain. The ensuing explosion caused an avalanche, burying 5 risen soldiers in ice and snow.
Well done, Master Pendragon.
Aram said, panting, knowing all too well that he did most of the work. Law grabbed Aram's hand and helped him to his feet. Those abominations can't be defeated like noble men. They don't bleed. There are few ways to defeat the risen. Incapacitating them or making the bodies unusable is your best defense. Aram just bowed, taking in his master's wisdom.
Thank you, Master, but we'd best be moving.
They quickened pace and advanced up the mountain. The dark wizard Guldamir observed Law and Aram through the eyes of an undead raven. His eyes whited over in a trance. He watched the battle as they drew closer to his location at the summit of Mount Muse. 3 statues of beautiful semi-clad women stood nearby, though immaculately carved, as if these women had been turned into stone, not carved by it. All held their hands over a pool. From the hands flowed water of different colors. One was faintly white, one faintly green, and one faintly black. They swelled together into a whirlpool, seemingly holding a perfect balance, one eliminating the other in a perfect trinity. Guldamir blinked a few times, regaining consciousness. His eyes returned to normal. He stood slightly stooped. A black full-length robe covered him. Black hair fell to his shoulders, and a pale-looking face peered out from under it. 10 black-cloaked men stood in a circle around him, lit up by the glowing essence of the pool. Guldamir looked around at his followers, and with a sneaky smirk said,
"He's almost here. Our time is nigh. Immortal life and power without limitation is at our fingertips."
The cloaked men congratulated each other and showered each other with praise.
"Together we will undo the seal, release the chaos within, and the power will be ours to control."
One man chirped up among the rabble.
"But all our power combined together could only scratch that statue. It would require at least 100 more mages to accomplish the task of actually destroying them."
Guldamir looked displeased at the Maysayer. He looked over and pointed his direction.
"That scratch released enough chaos magic to allow me to raise our fallen dead from here."
Guldamir spat at him.
"Imagine what we could do if we were to destroy all 3.
He said greedily. The men nodded their approval, but the Maysayer spoke up again.
"It took us all to the point of death, trying to do just that. Even if you could find 100 mages, they would probably die trying. No one can wield that much power without sacrificing their life force."
Guldamir straightened up and walked toward the man.
"You don't seem to realize how much more powerful you are just from that small release of chaos magic."
He smirked. Guldamir held his hands out wide, gesturing to the rest of his followers.
"Allow me to demonstrate the power of chaos magic."
Guldamir placed his hands together as if in prayer. His followers did the same. Black smoke like miasma reached up from each of them and flowed into Guldamir. He raised a hand, now blackened from the dark magic, forward toward the Naysayer.
"Wait. Please? Stop!"
He cried as his life energy was ripped from his body. He slowly became hollowed out, a husk drained of any semblance of life. Guldamir was engulfed in the black miasma. It moved with him like a shadow. Dark claws of smoke appeared around his hands.
Those who don't believe in my divine power will not be privy to the spoils of my labor.
The rest of the cloaked figures repeated their precept in a unison chorus. Immortality is the gift of Guldamir. Guldamir smiled and whispered under his breath,
And soon it will all be mine.
Guldamir's followers backed into the shadows at the side of the cave, leaving Guldamir alone in the glow of the muses, smirking to himself. Lorecaster Pendragon and Aram reached the mountain peak. At the very top was a small cave lined with healthy greenery in contrast to the ice and snow around them. Lore looked over at Aram. Be careful. Our enemy is prepared. Danger could be lurking around any corner. Aram nodded and grabbed the staff from his back. Lore looked over the lands of Thalaria from the top of the mountain. Lush greenery covered the land beyond the mountain. A good reminder what we're fighting for, Lore said. That he knows the Tower of the Magi. One day I'll return to the tower and put right the wrongs I committed there, he thought to himself. The cave was surprisingly warm compared to the harsh, icy wind outside. The air was warm and humid inside. Lore and Aram looked to each other perplexed, then moved further into the cave. Lore took the lead, lighting the way with a small fire in the palm of his hand. They descended down naturally formed stone stairs. They could hear the sound of scuttling from small exoskeleton-covered creatures on the walls. Descending further, the darkness seemed to get denser, as if squeezing the light. It began to move strangely, like it was retreating from the light instead of being illuminated by it. Aram saw a shadow moving on the wall like a clawed hand, but it faded from view in the light before he got a good glimpse of it.
Master Pendragon.
I know. We are being watched. There is Thar magic being used here, but it has an obvious weakness. As they descended further, the clawed hands multiplied at the edges of the shadows, clawing on the ground but being driven back by the light. Suddenly, and without warning, a black claw with talons 6 inches long on each finger shot out of the darkness toward Lore. He raised his fiery palm and blasted it away with a gout of flame. Lore dropped to one knee, and Aaron grabbed him.
Are you okay, Master?
Lore looked up as the darkness enveloped them. Took me by surprise is all. I put a little too much into the fire. I'll be all right. I just need to rest a while. A shrill, scratchy, high-pitched voice came from the darkness around them.
We have you.
Startled by the silence broken, Aram tore his sleeve and wrapped around his staff and began channeling into it. Thor smiled. You've been reading my books again, haven't you? Aram smiled back and shrugged. Thor addressed the voice calmly. Who's there? What were you waiting for?
We were waiting at the edge of reality, in the dreams of the living, trapped beyond the border, unable to pass. The deal has been made. The abyss is open. The boundary between our world and yours has finally arrived. The age of darkness will soon begin.
Aram summoned a small fire in his palm to light his staff, and the light burst out against the dark, only to be repelled again like being squeezed into a smaller space. The only luminescence was the staff on Moore and Aram's faces. The voice seemed entertained as it giggled around them annoyingly.
We are so close, so very close.
A clawed black hand reached around Aram's face. His eyes grew wide, and before they could react, it pulled him into the darkness. Lorecaster Pendragon slammed his fists together. Life energy surged through his body. He extended one arm straight up, grabbing it at the elbow with his other hand. His fist clenched and began to glow with a bright white light. It grew stronger, and it pushed back against the encroaching darkness which forced itself around the light. The light grew until it enveloped the entire cavern. With one last push of effort, it exploded out from Lore's fist in a blinding flare of luminescence. There was a shriek in the dark, and the shadow claws were driven back by the light. Aram was sitting against one wall, his staff now illuminating the room naturally.
What was that thing?
I don't know, but I think Guldamir may have already done something irredeemable. Law slumped to the floor, drained. Aram looked at him concerned.
You didn't overdo it, did you?
Law looked at him confused. No, I'm fine. I've never felt chaos magic move so quickly or abundantly before. Whatever Guldamir is up to, it's affecting the flow of power. It also seems to be releasing creatures from the abyss. We have to hurry. Law tried to stand, but was too weakened by his last spell. Dawn ahead, Aram. I'll be right behind you. I just need to catch my breath. I'll be right behind you. Scout ahead a short way and tell me what you find. Aram nodded. He moved down the corridor. The sound of scuttling creatures was no longer audible. Only the dripping of water from stalagmites and the footsteps of Aram's boots. Aram found himself entering a large open cavern. 3 statues of semi-clad women were in the middle, surrounding a luminescent whirlpool. At the other end was an opening, overlooking an outside cliff face. One of the statues was slightly damaged and leaking out a smoky white miasma. Out of the shadows stepped a young priestess.
Hello, Squire. What brings you here?
Aram looked over to her suspiciously.
We were following a dark wizard. He raised prominent dead mages from across the land and brought them here with promises of immortality.
The priestess smiled at him.
Well, it's a good thing he's gone then.
Aram looked perplexed and asked,
Where did he go?
Well, in there, I guess?
She pointed to the whirlpool. Aram walked over to the pool and peered in. The priestess walked over to him. Her voice changed into that of Guldamir as he said,
Yeah, take a closer look.
Guldamir shoved Aram into the whirlpool. He put his hands together in prayer, and a black miasma raised from the black-cloaked figures as they stepped into the light. The black miasma flowed from them into Guldamir. Aram tried to escape, but was fighting the current of the whirlpool.
You're not Pendragon, but you'll have to do. You'll be the catalyst I use to enhance my power,
Guldamir said, raising one hand to the already damaged statue, then the other toward Aram. The black-cloaked figures started to chant as they channeled power to Guldamir. The black miasma reached towards Aram. Dark shadow hands reached out from it that held him firmly. Life energy started to drain from Aram's body as the statue began to shake and turn to dust. The more it fell apart, the stronger the mages seemed to become as the roof started to shake. Sparks started appearing in the air like reality itself was becoming unstable. Aram choked from the life being drained from his body. He looked to the entryway. Standing there was Lawcaster Pendragon. Fists clenched together, he extended an arm towards Guldamir. Grabbing his elbow firmly with his other hand, he launched a fireball at the Dark Wizard, sending him flying into the back of a cavern. Law shouted to Aram, "Extend your staff!" Aram was weakened and struggling to stay afloat. He managed to take his staff from his back and extend it toward Law. Law grabbed the staff and pulled Aram from the water.
Thank you, Master.
Law looked over at Guldamir's charred corpse. The black miasma surrounding him swirled and picked him up from the ground. 2 of the black-cloaked mages fell, drained of all their life energy. Law looked on horrified. Aram, the ones in black cloaks are amplifying his powers. We need to take them out first. Aram took his staff in hand.
Time for some payback.
Aram rushed forward. He stabbed the point of the staff into the ground and somersaulted over it, launching himself into the air. He lifted the staff over his head with him. As he fell, he brought it down with full force. The sound of crushing bone echoed throughout the cave as a black-cloaked mage's head caved in. The mage slumped to the ground in a heap, the black miasma link between him and Guldamir wisping away. Guldamir moved toward Aram, but caught his reflection in a shallow pool. The skin was burned from his lower jaw, and he growled with anger. Summoning his power, he moved with incredible speed and strength towards Aram, who brought up his staff for protection. A black miasma surrounded Guldamir's hand and he made a sharp claw, slashing at Aram. Aram managed to block the blow with his staff, but the force of the blow had him sliding backward toward Law. Law slammed his fists together and pulled on his life energy to infuse it with chaos magic. The air began to move around Law rapidly as Guldamir rushed forward to attack again. Law moved his arms around using the Lotus technique, full arcing circles around his body as if collecting the air around him. He brought his feet to a full 180 degrees and threw the air toward Guldamir. Law unleashed a taunt so devastating it threw Guldamir and his black-cloaked acolytes backward against the far wall. Aaron smiled at Law, astonished.
When will you again teach me that one?
Law smiled back at him. Maybe you haven't been reading my books enough, Law chuckled. Guldamir rose once again, his robes now in tatters. He growled with rage. The black miasma ripped the life from his remaining acolytes and they all fell to the floor. The smoky miasma coated Guldamir in a black and green hue. It pulled him up, levitating him above the floor, making a shadow resembling a black hooded grim reaper with large taloned claws as grew to the size of wine barrels. Guldamir flew toward the two men, lifting the black claws in an upward strike. He landed both hits on Aaron and Law. Aaron blocked with his staff and Law summoned a magic ward, a type of solid magic wall to protect himself. It shattered like glass on contact, and they flew back and landed hard, bouncing against the stone floor. Guldamir flew forward and picked up Aaron. He began to crush it in one claw. Aaron screamed out in pain as the claw ripped into his flesh. He dropped the staff to the floor. Law rushed in, fists together, then extended both hands out in front. He grunted with the effort as he sent multiple fireballs at Guldamir. Guldamir saw him coming and dropped Aaron, knocking the fireballs away with the shadow claws. As Law came closer, Guldamir tried to grab him in his clutches, but Law unleashed a fireball at point-blank range, blowing even more of Guldamir's now decrepit face away.
Fool!
Guldamir growled and smacked Law into the wall. Law slumped to the ground. Guldamir moved toward the damaged statue. He grabbed it in his blackened claw and he squeezed with all his strength. It began to shatter as light spewed forth from the cracks. Careless magic began to pour into Guldamir as the statue crumbled in his hands, astonished at the sheer power it yielded to him.
With this power, I will be nigh unstoppable.
Aaron stumbled to his feet, blood dripping from his wounds. He walked toward Law.
Master, get up. We can't let Guldamir do this. Get on your feet.
Aram shouted as he helped Law up. Blood dripped from Law's mouth and he wiped it away with his hand. Aram nodded to Law as he picked up his staff and held it out in front of him. He channeled his life force into the weapon, then charged at Guldamir and threw the staff like a javelin at a rocketing speed. A golden aura trailed behind it as it penetrated into Guldamir's body. Necromancer cried out in pain, and Aram hit the floor from exhaustion. Statue still in claw, Guldamir squeezed it with all his might. The cracks grew larger. Law could feel an influx of chaos magic pouring from the statue. If Guldamir can use it to strengthen himself, then so can I. He slammed his fists together. Electrical energy started crackling around him. He extended one arm and grabbed his elbow with his other hand. He pointed his index finger forward and aimed at Guldamir. I can't allow this to continue. Electrical energy powered up around Law. It crackled around him, burning his robe and striking scorch marks across the floor. Guldamir's eyes went wide, seeing the danger he was in. His black miasma claw extended from him. It picked up Aram and moved him into the path between Law and Guldamir, just as Law was about to unleash his attack. Aram, I can't hold it! You have to move! Aram wasn't responding. His body was lifeless in Guldamir's clawed hand. Law's vision blurred from overextending himself. At the last minute, he fired to the right to avoid hitting Aram. A lightning strike with all the force the Master Wizard could muster exploded forth, launching Law backward with such force that he was thrown into the wall behind him. The lightning strike slammed into another new statue and it shattered into pieces, releasing a torrent of chaos magic as Guldamir shattered the other in his claws. Power in the chamber began to build immensely. Lor slammed his fists together, crossing his arm in a cross pattern in front of him, and summoned a powerful magical ward around him with the last of his life force. The room was overcome with bright golden light as chaos magic penetrated into Lor and Guldamir from the statues. The magical energy exploded outward. Guldamir was caught in the explosion. The flesh was blown from his body as it engulfed him and Aram. The peak of Mount Muse exploded into a giant golden energy ball. Guldamir and Lor were thrown out from the mountain peak like missiles in opposite directions. The remaining statues shattered into 5 shards and were thrown in all directions. The giant ball of gold chaos magic grew massive in size as it rose up above the peak of the mountain, sending golden beams of power into the land. It melted through the stone, digging huge gorges into the earth as it released its power. Cities and towns that were visible from the mountaintop were vaporized as people screamed out at the sight of the immense power burning everything in its wake. A massive earthquake ravaged the land. Mountaintops erupted into rivers of magma. Bodies of water evaporated as everything was consumed by the blast. The energy ball got smaller as it released power until, in one final coup de grace, it exploded into a dark shockwave that shattered the mountain beneath, leaving a crater where Mount Muse once stood. The shattered pieces of the final statue landed at 5 points around the land. Magic wards shot up and shielded those areas from the devastation. What was left was a desolate, smoldering wasteland with 5 patches of land left unspoiled. The rest was completely ravaged. Hours later, Guldamir awoke. He rose to his knees in the remnants of a destroyed church in what was once the capital city of Thalaria. Smoldering fires raged about him. The dark smoke around him was thick and dusty. He might have coughed and he had a throat left to do so. Most of his flesh had been blasted from his bones. He looked down at his skeletal hand, which he was still quite able to move.
Interesting,
Guldamir said, perplexed as he turned his hand back and forth in front of his face. The black smoky miasma clung to him like his own flesh used to do. He caught his reflection in a broken mirror, seeing his face was mostly gone. His eyes now just smoky black miasma with gold pupils. His tattered robe still draped about him. The world was dark, the sky full of dark clouds.
I did it! I'm immortal!
Guldamir shouted victoriously. He stood and extended his hand out to test his newfound power. The people that weren't completely obliterated in the cataclysm around it began to rise from the rubble. The first few rose to see that he was reviving the fallen. They begged for him to rescue their loved ones. Guldamir wrapped the hood of his cloak around his wounded face and held his head high.
I only revive those who worship me. For I am Guldamir, and even the gods fear my power.
The people began to kneel before him in reverence as he began to revive the fallen. Days later, Lorecaster Pendragon found himself awakened by a bucket of water to the face. His arms were held with thick, magically reinforced chains that glowed with a golden light. He blinked blurry eyes as 2 people came into view. Before him stood Aram, behind him Guldamir in his lich form. He seemed to be in some kind of cave with shimmering black walls and a large stone door. Laura spoke in a weak and defeated voice. "Aram, are you all right?" But Aram did not respond. His head down, the lich spoke.
Now that the world knows who caused this cataclysm, I no longer have use for this wretch.
Guldamir said, waving a skeletal hand. Lore watched as Aram's risen body turned to dust and bone and fell to the floor. Lore looked at Guldamir with fury in his eyes. "What have you done?" he growled.
Aram told everyone, Well, everyone who I revived, that it was you who caused the disaster. And since he was your apprentice, and with your less than reputable past, everyone believed him.
The lich cackled at his own brilliance. Law fought against his chains, attempting to break free. "You foul worm! When I get out of here, you'll pay for this!"
Oh!
Guldamir laughed teasingly.
"You're never leaving this place, Pendragon. You're going to be here until I find out how to extract the power within you. Then I'll discard you like your little pet there."
He pointed a skeletal finger to the pile of ash and bone that used to be Aram. Law slumped down, hanging from his chains.
"Fact is, this might just be the safest place for you. Since I raised a lot of the peons from the dead, I am now somewhat revered as their savior. Little do they know I'll be harvesting their young to feed my own being. I am immortal as long as I have them to give me more life."
Law raised his head. A golden light shined in his eyes. He summoned the power within him and planted his feet firmly on the ground, circulating his power as he did with his hands, then launched a kick forward, knocking Guldamir out of the room with a powerful gust of wind. 2 circular steps at his feet, and the wind slammed the stone door shut in the lich's face. Guldamir started feeling frantically around the door for a way to open it as golden runes appeared running down the crack at the door. It burned Guldamir's skeletal fingertips to ash. The lips scampered back, looking at his damaged hand. He was locked out of his own prison.
"Fine, Pendragon. You can't hide away in there forever. And when you emerge, I will be waiting for you, and I will take the power from you."
The lich extended his skeletal hand. Black miasma swirled over it and coalesced into a raven. The raven perched itself above the door. The bird opened its wings wide, and black miasma fell from them over the door, sealing it from the outside. Guldamir then walked away, leaving Pendragon imprisoned within.